What is up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Shot 3 from the Tee podcast. I am your host for this first half of the podcast, or first segment, I should say, Jason Roslin. I'll be joined by Matt Jones on the other side of it. But before we're joined by him, I like to do a few things and go over some of the stuff that you're going to see this week. I'm going to review my pricing from last night, which I did pretty darn good. Can't complain. One of probably my better ones of the year. Maybe it was the most easiest or glaring. Maybe that's why. But regardless, I still got it right. We'll go into some sponsors exemptions, some field changes. A lot of sponsors exemptions this week. Got Monday qualifiers back. Got an interesting one there as well. Then I'm going to add in a segment here just because it was a buzz in the golf Twitter world today with Joel Damon kind of coming out and making a point. I'm going to add in the major medical extension category here. Just an interesting one of guys that they need to get. I believe they have like somewhere between 4 and 8 starts, and they need to get enough FedEx Cup points that equal the top 125 golfers from the previous year. That's to get full status. Of course, they gain enough FedEx Cup points for other things, like 125 to 150. They'll be able to get status and go through the Korn Ferry Tour and such like that. So all is not over or ended if they do not fulfill it. But still, they would like to fulfill their terms of the extension. Anyways, that was just kind of a brief preface. We'll go over the guys that are playing on that, do a couple of opening odds and salary discussion, and then we'll bring in Matt Jones after that. So let's dive right in to the prices. First, let's review what I had. Rory at 11.9, Rahm at 11.7, Woods at 10.8, Xander at 10.7, Rose at 10.5, Reed at 10.2. So that was my guesses. Here's the real now. Rory at 11.6, so I'm 1 for 1. Rahm at 11.3, 2 for 2. Tiger at 10.8. Man, I actually nailed the price on it as well. So 3 for 3. And then Rose 10.3 and Xander 10.1. So while I flip-flopped those guys, I had talked about that exact scenario on the pod last night. I said maybe they end up putting Rose above Xander here because of the course history thing. But Xander certainly has the better form. Regardless, they went with Rose. And they actually threw in Matsuyama at 9.9, putting Patrick Reed way down the list. So maybe I was off on Patrick Reed. Still 5 of 6. It's got to be a solid B+, maybe even creeping up into the A- range for my guesses last week. Hope you enjoy that fun little segment. Just a couple of minutes where I just try and guess the game of DraftKings. So, all right, let's head into the sponsors exemptions this week. Got a bunch of them. Dominic Bazzelli, who flashed on the leaderboard last week before fading. Will Gordon, who we've seen a couple of times now. We saw Gordon flash on the leaderboard at the Sony. He was in the Sony via his top 10 in his start at the RSM. So Will Gordon gets another one here. Bill Haas, who needs a sponsor exemption, not using a career money earnings or anything like that yet, just going through the sponsors exemption the way. Patrick Martin, he was a standout All-American at Vanderbilt. But problem is he struggled to find his footing on the Mackenzie Tour. He's made just 4 cuts in 9 attempts. No top 5s either, though. So Martin will be searching for something here in his first PGA start as a pro. Then Peter Udeline, Mr. Titleist, he's playing out of that 125 to 150 category, which really it does not get you many starts at all. So Uline will definitely take the sponsors exemption and run with it as he heads to a course that I'm sure he knows pretty well. Then we got Hunter Mahan. We know that in the story with him. Harris English. Talked about Harris English last week, still needing sponsors exemption until that reshuffle happens. Then Stuart Sink. Isaiah Salinda, who we had last week. Terrible, and we talked about last night on the opening tee pod. What an awful, awful miscut. Maybe he'll be able to come back from that. So his teammate at Stanford, Brandon Wu, who you guys know I'm quite high on, although he did just miss the cut at the Hong Kong Open, shooting 71-71, missing the cut by 1. I don't know what was going on there. But still, Brandon Wu, he has not missed the cut on the PGA Tour in his 2 tries. Definitely am interested in him a little bit this week. And then the last one is Justin Sue, who ran with the Morikawa Hovland and Wolf Group in college, but has failed to meet up to their expectations on the pro level. However, he has seen 8 starts, making just 1 cut at the PGA Tour. However, he's gone down to the Latin America Tour now that he doesn't have status anywhere, and he's done very, very well there, actually. So maybe a Harry Higgs style here going on. In any case, so like I said, he's been working on the Latin America Tour. He's made all 5 cuts and earned 4 top 10s in those 5 starts. So maybe he's found something down there south of the border, and maybe he can have that translate this week. Now we'll go into field changes as I'm breezing right through this. Field changes this week. Got a couple. Bryce Garnett and Charles Howell are out. Those spots were filled up by the sponsors' invites that I just went over. Troy Merritt is out. John Senden is in for him. And then most recently, just not too long ago here, Adam Schenk is out and Zach Sucher gets the nod. So now we go back to our Monday qualifier segment, which is a great way to just check in on some of the guys that are doing it the absolute hardest way you possibly can. Going up and playing. This week it was 3. It looked like there was maybe 75 competing for 3 spots. Normally it's even worse than that, I think. It's 4 spots this week. I apologize. Shortchanged a little bit. First one is Harry Hall. Harry Hall's a product from UNLV via England. And what's really interesting here is he's made 2 professional starts, both on the European Tour, and both he came in the top 15 on. So really interesting, but yet he failed to qualify for the Korn Ferry Tour through the qualifying series there. He made it all the way to the final qualifications or whatever, and came in a tied for 113th. So a bad 4 days there for Harry Hall, and now struggling just to find some status anywhere and find players. He Monday qualifies for the Farmers, and hey, maybe that'll be the start of something. You never know. We've certainly seen some more magical things happen than that. Speaking of magical things happening, Jacob Bergeron, the product out of LSU, turned pro last year, but has found no playing pretty much anywhere, except for the Latin America Tour, where he's made 12 starts. He's made 10 cuts, but only 1 top 10. So maybe steady, but not quite good enough to get him into the upper echelon. But Jacob Bergeron gets a start this week. Next one is KK Limbasaw. I probably butchered that. I apologize. He's a redshirted senior at Cal. Currently ranked number 28 in the World Amateur Golf Rankings. So obviously, if he's a redshirted senior, maybe he doesn't have quite the talent to have competed with the Morikawas of the world. But 28th in the World Amateur, that's not too bad. And maybe a late blossomer for Limbasaw. And then the last one is a mini tour journeyman by the name of Edward Olson. He's been around. He's worked all kind of different jobs in the golf world, and most recently, 4 or 5 months ago, he was working at Seascape Golf Club when I tried to do some research about this guy. Honestly, yeah, it's a little bit of a stretch. Maybe I shouldn't have even gone that far, to be honest with you, gone that depth, because I doubt we're going to be playing him. But sure, Seascape, it's probably out there in California. Yeah, it's probably pretty close to San Diego. So that does it for the Monday qualifying segment. We're at about 8 minutes, so that's good. The segment with Matt's about 15, so I'll run through the major medicals. These are guys that are playing, like I said, off of an extension that they got hurt, and now they have a certain amount of starts to come back and fulfill their goals or their duties of the extension, which they have to qualify in the top 125. They have to earn enough FedEx Cup points to get them into the 125th or better place the following year. So Brunson Burgoon, who had a nice start last week. Kevin Stadler, who is running out of them. Graham Dillette making his 3rd start back. Ben Martin, who just actually did not fulfill his, so he comes out of this category. I forgot to update that. He comes out of this category, goes into the alternates now. Then we get Jamie Lovemark, Grayson Murray, who's coming off a top 10. John Huh, who had a pretty good week. Sung Yul No, who we talked about last week, I believe he might have made the cut. Actually, no, he didn't. Brandon Hagee, who actually led the field in birdies last week. but couldn't avoid the bogey, so something to keep a note there. And then Trey Mullinax, who went through a period last year where he was quite popular for DFS as well. He's been having his warm-up starts on the Corn Ferry Tour the last couple of weeks. So he'll need something to certainly get going. Trey Mullinax is the last one in the major medical extension. So before we bring in Matt, we're at 10:20. I'll give my 2 opening odds and salary discussion bets, or it's really just opening odds. Colin Morikawa, 31-1. You need to have a pretty good distance off the tee here and really need to have accuracy. Morikawa has both and has shown that this year. So like him, plus I like the fact that he definitely knows, of course, went to UCLA, so not too far away, and I know he's from the area as well. No, Morikawa went to Cal. I apologize. He did not go to UCLA. That was Cantlay. Anyways, Brandon Wu is the other one, 250-1. I like the top 20 bets and top 10 bets there for some value. He's already come in the top 20 once before in his 2 starts on the PGA Tour, so some pretty good value there. All right, I think that does it for the first segment here. We'll bring in Matt Jones for the second one, a really fun segment. I've actually already recorded it, so I know a little bit about it, and it was a really good one. We've got some great names on there tonight, so stay tuned for that. Thanks for joining, everybody, and until next time, I wish everybody the best of luck in probably the best tournament of the year up until this point. I think that's a fair statement to say. So until next time, everybody, cheers. All right, welcome back to the second segment of the Shot 3 from the Tee podcast. I am joined, as I am weekly, by Matt Jones. You can find him at Twitter, at Matt Jones TFR. He does all of his work over at RotoViz and is allowed, has this nice tool that they have over there that allows us to come up with some of these split data that we talk about weekly, and some good stuff going on over there. Matt, I know I saw you guys, most of the PGA stuff is free before the Masters. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're going through the Masters this year, all in front of the paywall, so you can peruse at your leisure. It's nice to do that, you know.
Yeah, it's a nice little feature to give. Yeah, absolutely. So definitely go and check out his stuff that he's got going on over there. So let's break into this week. Finally, we've got a really good week. Though I'm surprised DraftKings, I think, might have let the ball down a little bit with their pricing, although their secondary-ish contests were better than they normally have been. But FanDuel stepped up their game, which is nice. FanDuel finally broke into the $25,000 to first place, plus they upped their higher dollar buy-in as well. So some good stuff to certainly break down and talk about. Torrey Pines South is going to see 3 rounds. It's 7,700 yards, or just about. Got a bunch of par 4s over 450 yards. So let's start there, if you don't mind. Did you find any guys that typically play these longer par 4s well?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of the guys that you probably up at the top that you would think of usually, but I guess Joaquin Nieman at 8,600. I feel like he could be a little bit more expensive than that, and he pops over 450 yards. So he's a guy that I'm definitely interested in. He's one of my favorite golfers to watch in general. And he's coming off of is it like one of the worst putting performances in the history of the PGA Tour? I think he lost like 7 strokes putting at the Sony. So if that swings back a little bit, he could have had quite the week.
Yeah, well, he made the cut there and averaged losing 1.83. So yeah, it's over 7.
Kept missing everything.
Yeah, it happens with him. And I'll be honest, he had a really good stretch of golf where his putter was going well. But at the beginning of the season, I remember following him around at the Valspar last year, so just about 10 months ago, and he was putting one-handed, working on a drill because he was putting so bad. And you go look at his strokes gained data, and that'll literally mirror that. I mean, tournament after tournament, he was losing at least a stroke per round. So hopefully that's not creeping back, right? And it's just a little one-off scenario where he just had a really bad week.
Yeah, he's never going to be Spieth-like, but he can if he can figure out a way to gain like half a stroke per round across the tournament, he's usually in pretty good shape.
Yeah, for sure. And certainly his game has taken another step forward, which is great to see. You mentioned Rory. He was the best on tour last year in the actual PGA Tour ranked par 4 efficiency from 450 to 500 yards. No surprise there. I'll come up with one kind of surprise name, and then I'll throw it back to you maybe for one more surprise name. This guy came in a tie for 7th last year in the PGA Tour standing, and has really come a long way in his game. I remember this guy was fighting for his tour card not too long ago. I'm talking about Cameron Tringale. 7,100. He was 7th last year, as I just mentioned. Sorry if I'm clicking. I'm trying to get his strokes gain stuff up from the last couple of weeks. But, yeah, did he pop for you while I try and get it up?
Yeah, for sure. He's one of these guys who really has just all of a sudden figured like a bunch of stuff out, right? Like we weren't too sure we were going to see him for very much longer on tour in general in stretches the last couple of years, and all of a sudden he just seems like a fixture and has been just playing really great.
Yeah, he has. Here we go. Finally, I don't know why it took me so long to find his name. Last week, the around the green was good. His approaches, now this is only 2 rounds. His approaches were off, but it was the first time that he had lost in approaches in looks like at least 4 starts dating back to the Sanderson. So I'm thinking that's maybe a 1-week blip there for Tringale. How about you for maybe an against the grain name for this longer par 4 stat category?
Yeah, Doc Redmond is an interesting name for me this week. He for the much longer, like over 500, he wasn't too great, but I have him as top 5 for 450 to 500. And he's 6,500 this week. He grades out really well in my expected birdies metric that I've been talking about from here, every so often. So he's definitely a guy that piques my interest as sort of a fill-in way down at the bottom.
Yeah, nice putting week last week. Approaches looked good, so it definitely looks like he could be in form, and a very interesting play there. Doc Redmond, we know he's got the pedigree. And we've seen, some of these guys. We always see the cream rise to the crop, and we've also seen some of these younger guys that had some college pedigree do well here. So, all right, let's move on to – and again, I think a lot of these that I mentioned this last week too. I believe there's a lot of crossover here between the stats that we talk about, especially with a longer course. This next one, though, proximity from 200 to 225, looks like all of the par 3s, mostly every day, are going to be in that category. So, again, a little crossover from the par 4 one we just did. But have any new names from the 200 to 225 category?
Yeah, Scott Stallings pops a little bit. He wasn't super sharp last week on his approach, but again, two measured rounds, and definitely, you could take that for what it's worth, basically.
Yeah. Yep.
But he's a guy who graded out pretty highly for me in that category, and the one that we're about to get to with these over 7,600 yard courses, he also grades out really well and has positive splits there in addition to this. So again, another pretty, what is he, 6,900 this week?
Yeah, I was just about to say.
Nice and cheap, easy fill in for your lineup to get up to some of these more expensive guys.
Yeah, Scott Stallings, very interesting name there for sure. One that I had written down. Hold on, I just lost my place there. Okay, thank you. What happened was the PGA Tour just started posting their newer stats, and changing over from the old stats, I ran into trouble because my Excel query wasn't working well. It was just a mess, and I know you know all about that.
It's the worst.
However, this year it looks like Cam Champ looks like he's playing well, and it looks like last year too he was in the top 30. So Cam Champ, an interesting name. We know he bombs the ball off the tee, which could certainly be an advantage. Yeah, his iron game was struggling, but it seemed to pick up. He did make the cut last week, which is always a good thing. And let's see, I think he's probably pretty cheap this week. He's probably below 8,000 with how strong the field is. Good putter, good approach last week, good off the tee. Just really struggled around the green, which, don't get me wrong, is definitely concerning because he will miss more greens this week than he did last. But it's totally different grasses out there, and there's actually going to be rough. Maybe that'll help him. Maybe the dormant rough of last week was just really struggling for him comparatively to the field. So Cameron Champ, interesting name that I found for the longer proximity. All right, we can go into the last one then, the strokes gained for par 72. That's the key, over 7,600 yards. Jordan Spieth obviously is number one. No, I'm just kidding. Well, why don't you give us a few names? So I will say, the sister course, Bethpage Black, which it's not going to play as hard. Jordan loves that course and obviously played well at the PGA, but it's not going to play as hard, which definitely hurts him.
Yeah. So I mentioned Stallings already. Obviously I always, whenever I get the chance, need to talk about Gary Woodland.
Yes.
He gains a full extra stroke tee to green on courses longer than 7,600 yards. And for whatever reason, it could be just sort of a quirk with, in the sample that I have him in it, although it is 42 rounds, he actually averages more distance off the tee, and he hits more fairways for some reason on courses longer than 7,600 yards, which you would think that might be the opposite, more distance off the tee, maybe a couple less fairways. So I thought that was interesting. Sepp Straka is another guy at 6,900. It's a super small sample size, but he comes in playing very well right now, and he had the few rounds that he's had on longer courses, he's just completely crushed, over 5.5 strokes gained tee to green. So he's a guy that I'm definitely interested in. Also popped in the expected birdies stuff that I'm doing. So
interesting. He had a really good week with the putter last week, but almost an even better week with the approaches. In the 2 rounds, he gained almost 6 strokes, which is, geez, if he does that for the tournament this week, we'd be happy. So certainly like to see him coming in form. It was a good bounce back. His putter had been pretty good for a couple of tournaments, just could not string together the cut. I think he was probably right on the line, it looks like, at Sony, and missed it. And a good bounce back. Obviously with the, 4th place finish there last week?
Yeah.
Yep, really nice. All right, well, I think that's a good amount of names there and some fun names. So let's just say this. If this will be the last one out based on these things that we just suggested. If you could only fit in one of Rory and Jon Rahm, and you had to fit in one of those two guys, who are you picking for this golf course this week?
I don't know. I actually think that I'll probably find the 300 for Rory. I do love Jon Rahm in general, don't get me wrong, but he actually has slightly negative splits on courses longer than 7,600 yards. I fully anticipated, he was the first name that I looked up in the splits app, and I was a little shocked to see that. So that's a slight tiebreaker. Not to say that he can't do well here. We know that he obviously can. Yeah,
of course. Either of these guys could win, and that's why I had to kind of throw you into the fire there to get the one off. I think that'll be a big decision for a lot of people this week. If you are going to pay up, you're obviously going to probably pay up for one of those two over Tiger, which leads me to say I might lose or win some money on Tiger this week as we march on. But Matt, thanks so much for joining. I appreciate it very much, and we will be back next week. We've got – no, it's not the Waste Management already, is it?
Yeah, it should be, yeah.
Wow. Well, that's all. Yeah, it's a fun one as well. And before we know it, will be the Players will be here, and then the Masters. Oh my gosh! So good golf with obviously with the NFL in a break week. We've got a big focus on it, and of course with the NFL winding down, a lot of focus will shift over to PGA. So these will only get bigger and better. Again, Matt, thanks for joining. Have a great rest of your week, man.
For sure, you too, man.
And everybody else, we'll see you on the other side. Thanks for joining and listening to this week's version of Shot 3 from the Tee. Cheers, everybody.